This morning, while ironing the deep crimson folds of my graduation gown, I got the text. Busy helping your sister move, some other time. I just typed back, it's fine. They don't know that in 2 hours. I'll be receiving the President's Award on the memorial stage, in front of 2 vacant seats. I'm not waiting for anyone. I'm letting the empty chair speak for me. And then the calls began. My name is Gracie Coleman. I grew up in Riverton, Montana. It's a small town drawn with a heavy, certain hand. You could trace the whole map of my childhood memory in 3 stops: the white steeple of the First Presbyterian Church, the floodlights of the high school football field, and the wide, dusty aisles of the Barrett Sons Hardware and Agricultural Supply. My father's name was on the sign, but his father had put it there. To me, it was just the place that smelled like cold metal, fertilizer, and the cheap, sharp coffee my father drank all day. My father is Greg Barrett. He's a mechanic, a man who saves his words like their currency, and he is not a spendthrift. His hands are permanently stained, the lines in his palms etched in grease, and I always felt his silence was a kind of wall. My mother, Marla, is his opposite in volume but not in focus. She directs the church choir, and her life is a constant performance. Her hands are always moving, conducting hymns at the piano, conducting traffic in the kitchen, conducting the emotional temperature of our home. And then there is Tessa, my younger sister. Tessa is the star of the Riverton High cheer squad. She is bright and loud and takes up all the air in a room, inhaling attention and exhaling charisma. She was born knowing how to be looked at. I was born knowing how to look away. From the time I can remember, I was never just Gracie. I was an addendum, at church potlucks, at the grocery store, at the games Tessa was cheering for. The introductions were always the same. You know Marla and Greg, someone would say, and this is their star, Tessa. A pause, a brief, dismissive glance in my direction. And this is Tessa's sister, not their other daughter, not Gracie, just a possessive noun. Tethered to her, I learned to nod and smile, a small, polite shadow attached to her shine. The clearest line was drawn on my 10th birthday. It was in 5th grade. I had asked for a small party, just cake and a few friends from my class, but the date landed on the same weekend as Tessa's regional cheer qualifiers. She won. Her team took first. So my party was grouped. That was the word my mother used, a practical, efficient term. My celebration was merged with Tessa's victory party. The house filled up not with my friends, but with the entire cheer squad, their parents, and half the coaching staff. The air smelled of hairspray and teenage sweat. The banner in the living room, in glittery blue paint, read, "Congratulations, Tessa, the Riverton Wildcats." My mother, bustling with a tray of pigs in a blanket, found me by the stairs. "Isn't this great, Gracie? A full house for your birthday." I remember nodding, watching Tessa get lifted onto someone's shoulders. The cake was cut. It was in the shape of a giant blue megaphone. Later, when the noise had finally subsided and the last car had pulled away, my father pressed something into my hand. It was a small, spiral-bound notepad. On the cover, in bold green letters, it said, "Barrett Sons Hardware, your partner in planting, a promotional item from the spring fair." "Saw this at the co-op," he said, tapping the cover. "Figured you could use it, for school." I said thank you. That night, long after the house was still, I sat in my bed with the cheap notepad and a pencil. The house still held the faint, sickly smell of the party. I opened to the first page, the paper thin and slightly rough under my fingers. I wrote my first real sentence. I wrote the smell of birthday candles and sugar got mixed up with the smell of jealousy. And now I don't know which one is which. From that night on, writing became my refuge. That little notepad, and the ones that came after, became the only place in the world I was not Tessa's sister. I was just me. The words didn't have to be pretty, and they didn't have to be loud. They just had to be true. Writing wasn't a hobby. It was an act of self-authentication. Each sentence I wrote was a quiet declaration that I existed, At school, I became the person who made things work from the background. I was the one who knew how to unjam the old film strip projector, the one who stayed late to reformat the group presentation slides, the one who silently picked up the broken pieces of a project when the leaders got bored and wandered off. I was reliable. I was quiet. I was the human equivalent of good glue invisible, but essential for holding things together. In 8th grade, I entered the county science fair. While Tessa was practicing routines, I was in our garage, surrounded by my father's junk. He never noticed the parts I salvaged: old bicycle sprockets, scraps of sheet metal, a small motor from a broken drill. I spent weeks building a miniature wind turbine. I taught myself to solder, burning my fingers in the quiet of the garage, the smell of hot metal and flux becoming my own secret perfume. The fair was held in the high school gymnasium. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and nervous energy. I set up my turbine in a corner. It was small and ugly compared to the flashy volcanoes and styrofoam solar systems. I pinned my research notes to the backboard. I hadn't told my family the exact time of the judging. I had just told them the day. I looked for them in the metal bleachers. I saw the empty section where they would, theoretically, sit. I told myself they were just running late. When the judges announced the awards, they started with 3rd place, then 2nd. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a stupid, hopeful drum. And the 1st place award for innovation in engineering, the principal announced, goes to Gracie Coleman for scrapyard power, a functional wind turbine. I couldn't feel my legs. I walked up to the folding table, and the principal handed me a small, gold-colored plastic trophy and a blue ribbon. I stood there, blinking against the sudden, shocking brightness. A flashbulb went off to my left. I turned. It was Mr. Henderson, whose son had built a potato clock. He was smiling, lowering his camera. "Great job, kid," he said. That was really something. I looked back at the bleachers. The seats were still empty. The pop of that flashbulb cemented a new truth in my mind. It was a sharp, cold realization: being seen is not the same as being noticed. Being captured in a photograph by a stranger was just a record of light hitting a subject. It meant nothing. To be noticed would have required my family to be there, to be looking for me in the first place, that night. I got home late. I had to walk, carrying my turbine and my trophy. The house was dark. A note on the counter from Mom said, "Tessa had a late practice. Dinner is in the fridge." I went to my room and placed the small plastic trophy on my desk. It looked cheap under my desk lamp. I set it right next to the hardware store notepad, the one that was now almost full. They were the first 2 artifacts of a life I was building for myself. They were the proof, a cheaply made trophy and a free notepad. 2 pieces of evidence that a child was quietly assembling herself in the dark, without instructions and without an audience. A few weeks later, my maternal grandmother, Eleanor Finch, came to visit. She was not like the Riverton side of my family. She lived in Bozeman, read books I didn't understand, and always smelled like lavender and old paper. She was the only person who looked at me first when she entered a room. She found me on the porch, writing in my notepad. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just sat down next to me. "A writer needs a good book," she said. Her voice was low and smooth. She handed me a package wrapped in brown paper and string. Inside was a journal. It wasn't like my flimsy notepads. This was heavy, bound in dark, soft leather. The pages were thick and cream-colored, with a faint, clean smell. I touched the cover. It felt impossibly real. "Your grandfather used to say," Eleanor said, looking out at the street, "that most people just live inside the voice of the crowd." She put her hand over mine, her skin papery and warm. "When you forget who you are, Gracie," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "I want you to write in this. Write until you hear your own voice again, clearer than all the others." I held the book to my chest. It was the first gift I had ever received that felt like it was meant for me, not for the person I was supposed to be. Her words, and that leather-bound book, planted something in me. It was a silent, slow-growing promise. It wasn't a promise that my family would change, or that they would finally see me. It was a promise that one day I would go somewhere where the world would have no choice but to call me by my proper name. My junior year, Mr. Jonas Hale wrote 4 words in red ink at the bottom of my essay on The Great Gatsby. It wasn't a grade. It just said, "See me after class." My stomach tightened. Red ink was the color of correction, of failure. Mr. Hale was different. He taught literature not as a collection of stories, but as evidence of human survival. He was quiet, intense, and saw things in our writing that we didn't know were there. His small office smelled of pipe tobacco, old paper, and the floor wax used in the hallways. Sunlight cut a sharp, dusty rectangle across his desk. He motioned for me to sit. He tapped my paper. "Your thesis, Gracie," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You wrote, 'We mistake silence for emptiness, but silence is not a vacuum. It has a price.'" He looked up, his gaze steady. "It's a powerful claim. So, what price have you paid?" The question was so direct, so personal. It bypassed all my usual defenses. I didn't know what to say. I looked past him, at a dusty college pennant tacked to his corkboard. I thought of the megaphone-shaped birthday cake, the empty chair at the science fair, the way my name always came second, if it came at all. "My seat," I finally said. The words were barely audible, even in the small room. I paid with my seat. Mr. Hale held my gaze. He didn't nod. He didn't offer sympathy. He just accepted the answer as a statement of fact. "Good," he said. It was not the response I expected. "You write like someone who has earned her perspective. Most people just repeat what they've heard. You're analyzing what you've seen. Have you considered where you'll apply to college?" I shifted. "I don't know. My parents say Bitterroot Community College is practical. It's close to home." Mr. Hale leaned back in his creaking chair. "Practicality is a cage. Gracie, a small, comfortable cage. I think you should apply to Stanford." The word landed in the room like a dropped anvil. Stanford. It wasn't a place. It was a myth. It was California, sunshine, and a level of existence so far removed from Riverton, it seemed fictional. I gave a short, nervous laugh. "Mr. Hale, that's Hollywood. I'm from Riverton, Montana." "Stop defining yourself by your zip code," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. He pulled a brochure from a pile on his desk and slid it toward me. The cover showed sandstone arches and a bright green lawn. "They look for voices like yours. Just look at it." That night, I brought it to the dinner table. Tessa was describing, in detail, a new cheer routine. During a pause, I spoke into the gap. "My literature teacher, Mr. Hale, thinks I should apply to Stanford." My father, Greg, didn't look up from cutting his meatloaf. "That's Hollywood talk. Gracie, be realistic." My mother, Marla, chimed in. "Bitterroot is a wonderful school. You can get a 2-year degree, maybe in accounting, and be right here to help out. Besides," she added, the unspoken finale, "who pays for a place like that?" "He said they have financial aid," I offered, my voice already losing its conviction. "Dreams don't pay the heating bill," my father said, ending the conversation. The subject was closed. Outside, the dry Montana wind scraped against the side of the house, a sound that always felt like it was stripping everything down to the bone. I went to my room. I pulled the heavy leather-bound journal from Eleanor out of my desk. On my old, slow laptop, I opened the Stanford website. The images of the campus, the sandstone arches warm in the sun, looked like they belonged to another planet. I touched the screen, then opened my journal. On a clean, cream-colored page, I wrote, "No one in this house tries the impossible. They are afraid of the view from that high up. They prefer the valley, where the walls are close and they know the names of the shadows." That sentence was a declaration. It was a silent promise. My life split into 2. The public part was high school, my chores, the quiet presence at the dinner table. The private part was a secret, furious campaign. I joined the debate team. The first time I had to stand at a podium, My voice shook so badly I could barely read my notes. I hated the feeling of being looked at, but I kept doing it. I learned that an argument was a structure, and I, the invisible girl, was good at building structures. I learned to use my silence as a tool to pause, to let the weight of a point land before moving on. I got a part-time job shelving books at the county library. I lived in the stacks, surrounded by the quiet, dusty smell of other people's words. I hunted for scholarships. I wrote essays. I wrote dozens of them, pouring everything I had onto the page. I wrote about the physics of a turbine built from scrap. I wrote about the economics of silence. I wrote about what it means to build a self when no one is watching. Grandma Eleanor visited that fall. She found me at the kitchen table, buried in a mountain of FAFSA forms and scholarship applications. The table was covered in papers I couldn't make sense of. She put her hand on my cheek, her skin cool and papery. "They're trying to squeeze you into their mold, aren't they?" she murmured. I just nodded, my throat tight with frustration. "Gracie," she said, pulling up a chair. "When a root is strong enough, it doesn't just grow around the rock, it splits the rock open. When you finally move past the shape they've built for you, do not wait for them to understand the new one. They won't." The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in late March. It was snowing, a thick, wet, unseasonable snow that clung to the windows and muffled the world in white. I saw the mail truck pull away. I walked out to the mailbox, my boots sinking into the slush. The metal latch was frozen shut, and I had to wrench it open with my bare hands. It was there, a large, thick, cream-colored envelope, not the thin single-page letter of rejection. My hands were numb, but not from the cold. The return address was simple: Office of Undergraduate Admission, Stanford, California. I walked back inside, past my mother, who was on the phone organizing a choir bake sale. I went to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed for a long time, just holding the envelope. I tore it open. My eyes scanned the text, snagging on the words: "Congratulations, an exceptional cohort. The class of..." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 18 years. That night, I brought the letter to the dinner table. I laid it out, along with the financial aid award summary. I was proud. I was terrified. My father picked up the financial aid sheet. He skipped the acceptance letter entirely. His finger traced the columns of numbers. "Tuition," he asked. Just that one word. "I got the university scholarship," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It covers almost all of it. I'll still have to take 3 work-study jobs and a small loan. But I calculated it. I can do it." "Well," my mother said, rising to clear the plates, though we were barely finished, "you've always been the independent one, haven't you?" It was not a compliment. It was a statement of abdication. It was the sound of them washing their hands of this reckless, impossible thing I had decided to do. This was my journey. I would be walking it alone. August came, hot and dry. My departure was treated as an errand. Tessa had pre-season cheer camp. My father had to take inventory at the hardware store. My mother had a planning meeting at the church. It was all very practical. The day before I left, a package arrived from Bozeman. It was from Eleanor. Inside was a shawl, woven from soft wool in a deep, beautiful sapphire blue. Tucked in the folds was a note on her thick, cream-colored stationery. It said, "Just go. Don't look back to see who is watching. The seat next to me, wherever I am, is always ready for you. Wear this. It gets cold by the ocean." My father drove me to the Riverton Regional Airport. It was barely an airport, more of a landing strip in a small building. We stood by the curb in the dusty heat. He pulled my single, overstuffed suitcase from the trunk. "Right," he said. He cleared his throat and gave me a stiff, one-armed hug, patting my back twice. "Don't get any of those Hollywood ideas." "I won't," I lied. "Good. Call your mother when you land." I nodded. I picked up my suitcase and my backpack. I walked into the small terminal and did not look back. I thought of my life as a long, empty runway, and I was finally, After years of taxiing, airborne, the air in California smelled different. It wasn't the sharp, dry scent of Montana sage and dust. It smelled of eucalyptus, jasmine, and the distant, salty tang of the ocean. The Stanford campus was a shock. The sandstone arches of the main quad were vast and warm, glowing in the afternoon sun. It looked more like a European palace than a school. My dorm room was small, but my window looked out over that main quad. I watched groups of students moving in, parents hauling mini fridges and cases of water, siblings laughing, families taking endless photos, hugging. Then the door to my room burst open, and a small, vibrant person tumbled in, followed by a mountain of boxes. "Hi." "Oh my God. Hi, I'm Maya. Are you Gracie? This is amazing." "You got the good closet, Mom." "Dad, she's here. My roommate's here." Maya Brooks was from New Mexico. She was all kinetic energy, bright colors, and unfiltered warmth. Her family mom, dad, and a younger brother who looked bored descended on our tiny room, filling it with loud, affectionate, overlapping chaos. They unpacked her things, then mine. They insisted on taking me to dinner with them. They asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. That night, after her family had left for their hotel, Maya was on FaceTime with them. "I miss you already," she shouted into her phone. "Yes, Mom, I'll eat vegetables, I promise. Love you, Dad." She hung up and flopped onto her bed, smiling. I sat on my own bed, clutching Eleanor's blue shawl. The contrast between her world and mine was so sharp it felt like a physical blow. It was an acute, specific pain, the sudden, visceral realization that the silence I had grown up with, the emotional emptiness I had mistaken for normal, was not normal at all. I threw myself into my jobs. One of them was shelving books in the deep, silent stacks of green library. I loved it. I loved the smell of old paper, binding glue, and decades of floor polish. I loved the heavy, academic quiet. In Riverton, silence had been a punishment. It was the sound of being invisible, the sound of empty chairs at the science fair, the sound of unanswered questions at the dinner table. Here, in this vast, vaulted cathedral of books, silence was a privilege. It was ownership. It was the sound of active thought, of focus, of potential. It was the sound of my own mind working. Finally, without interruption, I would walk across the quad late at night, after my shift, carrying my books. I'd hear other students on the phone, their voices cutting clearly through the cool night air. "Hi, Dad. Yeah, my first macroeconomics lecture was great. Mom, can you send me the recipe for the green chili stew? I miss it." Each time, I felt it. A small, sharp pang in my chest, the old, familiar ache of the empty chair. But something new was happening. The pang would rise, and then, instead of turning into sadness, it would settle. It didn't make me want to cry. It cooled. It hardened. It solidified. Deep in my gut. Into a cold, clear, diamond-hard resolve. I was here. I had gotten myself here. And no one had saved me a seat. I would not fail. I would not be invisible. I would take the price I had paid. All those years of silence, and I would build something so strong and so real that no one could ever pretend they didn't see it. I found my place in a class called Ethics and Algorithms. It was in the computer science department, but it felt more like philosophy. The professor was Dr. Celeste Romero. She was a small, sharp woman with a quiet authority that commanded the entire lecture hall. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, the room went still. She had this way of talking about data, about network theory and resource allocation, that made it sound less like code and more like poetry. She spoke of systems as having moral appetites and of data points as human fingerprints left on a digital surface. Our midterm paper was an open-ended prompt: analyze an ethical failure in a modern automated system. I didn't write about the big, obvious topics like self-driving cars or facial recognition. I wrote about something I knew. I wrote about the systems that allocate resources like social services, or academic opportunities, or even just parental attention. I wrote about how these systems are designed to respond to noise, the loudest request, the most frequent complaint, the most dramatic data point. That's what gets the resources. But silence, I argued, is also data. It's just harder to collect. My paper was titled, "The Allocation Error: Why Systems Shouldn't Starve the Silent." I argued that by prioritizing the loudest, we inherently punish those who are quiet, those who are too isolated to report, too intimidated to ask for help, or too conditioned to believe their needs don't matter. We mistake their silence for contentment. We mistake their lack of noise for a lack of need. I got the paper back 2 days later. There was no grade on it, just a single sentence in Dr. Romero's precise, elegant handwriting. My office, Thursday, 4 p.m. My heart did the same stupid tumble it had done outside Mr. Hale's office. I walked into her office, a clean, bright space high up in the engineering building, overlooking the hills. Dr. Romero was sitting at her desk, my paper in her hand. "This is not a theoretical paper, Ms. Coleman," she said. She didn't look at me. She was looking at my words. "No, Professor, it's not," I said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and incredibly perceptive. It felt like standing in front of an MRI machine. "You write about a system that starves the silent. You understand the cost of being overlooked." I just nodded. "Good," she said, echoing Mr. Hale from years ago. "I'm not interested in theorists. I'm interested in architects. I'm running a small research project, a joint effort with the medical school. It's called EquiRoute." She explained, during the increasingly brutal wildfire seasons in California, rural health clinics in isolated communities were being cut off. Supplies of essential medications, insulin, asthma inhalers, blood pressure meds, and basic PPE would run dangerously low. EquiRoute was an attempt to build a predictive logistics model, an algorithm to analyze road closures, fire behavior, and clinic inventory to get supplies where they needed to be before the crisis hit. "The problem," she said, "is our data is biased. The clinics that are the most frantic, the ones with managers who call us 10 times a day, they're the noise your paper talks about. Our model keeps prioritizing them, but I have a clinic in a place called Dry Creek, up in Shasta County. They rarely file reports. Their data is always clean. They never ask for anything. And I know, for a fact, they are on the brink of collapse. The system is starving them because they are silent." She leaned forward. "I have 2 brilliant engineers, a med student, and a data analyst. They're all noise. They're trying to build a louder, faster engine. I need someone to listen for the silence. I need someone to manage the gaps nobody else is looking at. That's you. Can you start Monday?" I was speechless. "Yes," I managed to say. "Yes, I can." The lab was a small cluster of desks in a windowless room in the basement of the med school. The team was exactly as she'd described. 2 engineers, Raj and Ben, who spoke in a rapid-fire language of code I barely understood. A med student, Anya, who was pure, high-strung empathy, constantly on the phone with clinic managers, and Liam, the data analyst, who lived in a world of spreadsheets and saw people as standard deviations. They were all brilliant, and they were all talking past each other. My first week. I didn't say a word. I just listened. I listened to Raj and Ben argue about processing speeds. I listened to Anya plead with a clinic manager for an accurate inventory count. I listened to Liam complain that the data from the field was messy and unreliable. At the end of the week, I called a meeting. I pinned a map to the wall. "We're asking the wrong questions," I said. My voice was quiet, but the room went still. "We're trying to fix the noise. We need to fix the signal. Anya, you can't get accurate data from the Dry Creek Clinic, right?" "Never," Anya said, frustrated. "The manager, a woman named Maria, just says, 'We're fine, dear. Send what you can.' I know she's not fine." "Exactly," I said. "She's afraid. She's afraid that if she reports her inventory incorrectly, She'll be penalized. She's afraid of the system. She's been overlooked for so long. She's learned that silence is safer than asking. I turned to Liam. So, let's stop penalizing her for it. Let's create a new variable, a silence coefficient. Liam looked skeptical. A what? A weighting, I said. A factor we apply to any clinic that meets certain criteria. Understaffed, geographically isolated, a history of underreporting. Instead of reading their low report as low need, the algorithm should read it as a high-risk signal. It flags them for immediate human review. It assumes their silence is a symptom of distress, not contentment. Raj spoke up. So, we'd be intentionally biasing the data. Exactly, I said. We'd be biasing it toward equity. We'd be correcting for the human bias that created the silence in the first place. Dr. Romero gave us the green light to try. It took 2 weeks to code and implement. The first test run was a nightmare. The model went haywire, trying to send everything to the quietest clinics, but we refined it. I spent hours on the phone, not with the clinic managers, but with the delivery drivers, the dispatchers, the people who knew the back roads. I was coordinating the gaps. Then, in late October, the big test came, a massive wildfire. The Kincaid exploded, and the winds shifted. The main highway to Dry Creek was shut down. All our models said the town would be cut off for at least 72 hours. Anya, what's their inventory? I asked. Liam's data says they have enough insulin for a week, she said, biting her nails. And the coefficient, Liam ran the numbers. The silence coefficient is flagging them at 95%. The model is screaming that their data is wrong. Gox. Trust the coefficient, I said. Ben, is there another route? My driver contact knows a Forest Service road, I said, pulling up a map. It's a logging trail, but he thinks he can get a truck through. It's a risk. Do it, I said. Anya, call Maria. Tell her a shipment of insulin and PPE is on the way. Not if. It's on the way. We didn't sleep for 24 hours. We just watched the fire maps and the truck's GPS dot. A single green speck moving through a sea of red. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. It was Anya. She was crying. Gracie, she wept. Maria just called. Our truck just arrived. The highway officially closed an hour ago. She said her last report was wrong. She was down to her last 2 vials of insulin. 2. She has 9 diabetic patients, most of them elderly. Gracie, we got there just in time. I hung up the phone and just sat there, in the quiet, windowless room. I looked at the map on the wall. Dry Creek, a place I'd never been. A woman I'd never met. We had heard her. We had listened to her silence and understood it. It was a spiritual milestone. It wasn't a plastic trophy. It wasn't a blue ribbon. It was the deep, resonant thrum of impact. It was real. The work became my life. I was still shelving books at Green Library, still taking a full course load, and now I was running logistics for EquiRoute. I was the first one in and the last one to leave. Maya, my roommate, took to calling me the human rubber band. You just stretch and stretch and stretch, Gracie, she said one night, as I was mainlining coffee at 2 a.m. to finish a paper. I'm just worried one day you're gonna snap. I shrugged. I'm fine. I like the work. I know, she said, her voice soft. But you don't have to save the whole world in 1 semester. Dr. Romero said something similar. She found me asleep at my desk in the lab, my cheek stuck to a spreadsheet. She gently shook me awake and handed me a cup of tea. Gracie, she said, sitting on the edge of the desk, you've done the impossible. You taught a machine to be compassionate, but I'm going to give you some advice I wish someone had given me. She waited until I looked up at her. Do not burn yourself to the ground just to prove you belong here. You have already proven it. Your work speaks for you. You don't need to become a martyr. Her words hit me, but I didn't know how to stop. This was the only way I knew how to exist, to work until I was essential, to make myself so useful that no one could ignore me. The Stanford internal paper, the Daily, wanted to do a feature on EquiRoute. They called it a revolutionary blend of technology and compassion. The reporter wanted to focus on me, the undergraduate who had designed the empathy algorithm. The photographer came to the lab. "Great, let's just get a shot of you. Gracie, by the big map." I looked at Raj, Ben, Anya, and Liam, all standing off to the side. "No," I said. The photographer paused. "I'm sorry. This wasn't me," I said, motioning to the team. "This was all of us. Raj and Ben built the engine. Anya is the heart. Liam makes sense of the chaos. It's a group shot. Or it's no shot." The photographer, clearly annoyed, sighed and started arranging us. Maya, who had come to bring me a sandwich, snapped a picture from the side with her phone. When the article came out, I looked at the photo. The 5 of us, squinting under the harsh lab lights. I was in the middle, but I was part of a whole. I realized something. This feeling. This was success. It was not the loud, sharp, solitary spotlight of a high school victory. It wasn't a cheer, or a trophy, or my name being called alone. It was quieter than that. It was shared. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted by many hands. It was warmer. A week later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was, "Invitation to present Stanford Health Equity Symposium." The dean of the medical school was personally inviting me to be a keynote speaker. They wanted me to talk about EquiRoute. They wanted me to talk about the silence coefficient. I stared at the email. A keynote speaker. Me. I opened my leather-bound journal. I thought about the prompt. What would I even say? I thought about the noise of Tessa's cheer rallies, the noise of my mother's choir, the noise of the ignored telephone, the noise of the frantic clinics, and I thought about the silence of my father's garage, the silence of the empty bleachers, the silence of Green Library, and the potent, predictive silence of Maria in Dry Creek. I wrote down a phrase, from noise to music. I thought about how to explain that the people who are overlooked are not noise to be filtered out. They are the music the system was built to hear. The seed was planted. I didn't know it yet, but I had just written the first line of the speech that would change my life. The second weekend of October was Parents' Weekend. The campus, which was already beautiful, transformed. It became a sea of proud, beaming adults, wearing Stanford baseball caps and sweatshirts they had clearly just purchased from the bookstore. Maya's family, the Brooks, drove up from New Mexico in an RV. They descended on our tiny dorm room like a warm, loving, and incredibly loud weather system. "Gracie." Mrs. Brooks enveloped me in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and coffee. "You are too thin. Are you eating? We're taking you and Maya out for a real meal. A steak. Do you eat steak?" "I do. Mrs. Brooks, thank you." "Good. And you have to show us everything, the full tour. We want to see where you do all this brainy stuff we keep hearing about." So I became their unofficial campus tour guide. I led them through the main quad, pointing out the carvings on the sandstone arches. I took them to the top of Hoover Tower. I walked them through the depths of Green Library, my home turf, and Mr. Brooks whistled, impressed. "This is a lot of books, Gracie." I was good at it. I was good at rattling off the facts, the dates, the little-known stories about the architecture. I made them laugh. I smiled as Maya and her father bickered affectionately over which dining hall was better. I watched Mrs. Brooks take dozens of photos of Maya and me, of me alone. "Oh, this one is perfect for your grandmother, Maya. Look how smart you both look." We were standing by the Rodin sculpture garden, the late afternoon light turning the bronze figures into dark silhouettes. Mr. Brooks slung a friendly arm over my shoulder. "So, Gracie," he said, his voice booming slightly, "are your folks flying in later tonight? We'd love to take them to dinner, show them some New Mexico hospitality." The question was so casual, so kind, so utterly normal, and it landed on me like a physical weight. I felt the smile on my face become something brittle, something I was holding up with wires. "Oh, no," I said, the old, practiced excuse rolling off my tongue. They're swamped back in Montana. It's a bad time on the farm. We didn't own a farm. They really wanted to be here. Ah, that's a shame, he said, giving my shoulder a squeeze. Well, their loss. We get you all to ourselves. I laughed. The sound felt thin in the cool air. For the rest of the tour, I was a performer. I pointed. I explained. I smiled until my cheeks ached, but underneath it, a dull, familiar pain was radiating from my center. It was the ache of the empty chair, but this time it had a new, sharper edge. It wasn't just sadness. It was a cold, hollow embarrassment. I was seeing, up close, what a family looked like. They were loud. They were chaotic. They were present. They showed up. That night, after the Brooks had dropped us off with enough leftovers to feed our entire floor, I sat on my bed. My phone buzzed. My heart did a stupid, hopeful little leap. Maybe it was a text from my mom, asking how the weekend was. I opened the message. Gracie, hi honey, I need a big favor. My stomach dropped. I knew this tone. Tessa is having a total meltdown. The text continued. She has her final showcase rehearsal for the state cheer finals this weekend, and the choreographer is just awful. The music cues are all wrong for the tumbling passes, and she's a mess. You're so good with all that computer timing stuff. You have to help her. I typed back. Mom, I'm at school, in California. A new bubble appeared instantly. I know, but you could FaceTime her? Or maybe you could just drive home for the weekend. It's really important. She's counting on you. I stared at the screen. Drive home, a 20-hour drive, each way, to fix music cues for a cheer routine. I have midterms all next week. Mom, I typed. I can't. Well, just FaceTime her tonight then. She's expecting your call. She really needs this. Gracie, you know how much this means to her, I wrote. I'll see what I can do. I put the phone down, my hands shaking slightly. I felt stretched, thin. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. This time, it was from my father. It was not a text. It was a picture. A photograph of a massive, brand new, gleaming silver and blue machine, a new industrial lathe for his shop. The caption beneath it was 5 words. Expensive, but worth it. I looked at the image of the machine, an investment, a thing of value. He was proud of it. I took a breath. I turned back to my own work. My presentation for the Health Equity Symposium was in 3 weeks. I spent an hour designing the title slide. I was proud of it. It looked professional. It looked real. The title read, From Noise to Music Recalibrating for the Unheard. I took a picture of my laptop screen, a small, tentative, hopeful gesture. I sent it to the family group chat. Just wanted to show you what I'm working on for my big keynote presentation. I typed. I waited. The response was absolute silence. No, looks great. No, what's that about? Not even a thumbs up emoji. The screen was just blank. My message sat there, seen, but unacknowledged. My phone rang, an hour later. It was Grandma Eleanor. Her timing, as always, was uncanny. I heard a rumor from a little bird at the medical school that you're about to become a keynote speaker, she said. Her voice was like warm tea. I am, I said, my voice thick. I'm terrified. Good, she said. That means you respect it. You've spent a lifetime learning how to listen. Gracie, now you're finally learning how to speak. It's a powerful, dangerous thing, but I want you to remember something, my dear. What's that? When you finally find your voice and you start using it, remember to save room for silence. Not the kind of silence they gave you, the empty, punishing kind, but your own silence. The kind that lets you hear yourself think, the kind that waits for the right answer, not just the fast one. Her words settled me. I wasn't asking for their noise. I was building my own voice, but the old habits died hard. The symposium was a big event. The dean would be there. It was open to the public. A week before the event, I logged into the speaker portal. Guest tickets, the link read. My fingers acted before my brain could stop them. I reserved 2, guest 1 Marla Barrett, guest 2 Greg Barrett. I sent them the email with the digital tickets. "Hi, Mom and Dad," I wrote. "I know it's last minute and a long way to travel, but this is the biggest presentation of my life so far. I'm the keynote speaker after the dean. It's next Friday at 7. In case you wanted to come, the tickets are here. Love, Gracie." I got a reply from my mother 2 days later. "Oh, honey, that sounds amazing. We are so proud of you. That's the same night as Tessa's awards banquet, though. We already committed, you know how it is, but we'll be thinking of you." I read the text. Of course. The same night. I didn't reply. I just kept working. The night of the symposium. The auditorium was packed. It was huge, much bigger than I expected. I was backstage. Peeking through the heavy velvet curtain, I saw Maya and the entire Equiroot team, whooping and waving when they saw my eye. And in the third row, right on the aisle, I saw Grandma Eleanor. She was wearing her sapphire blue shawl, and she looked regal. She caught my gaze and smiled, a slow, confident smile. And next to her, 2 empty chairs, the tickets I had reserved. The event staff had even put "reserved for guest of speaker" placards on them. They were just sitting there, vacant, obvious. I was introduced. I walked out. The light was so bright I couldn't see anyone past the 4th row. I gripped the podium. I found my voice. I talked about Dry Creek. I talked about silence and systems and the moral failure of mistaking a lack of noise for a lack of need. Later that night, I went back to my dorm. Maya was asleep. The room was dark. I opened my leather-bound journal. I wrote a single sentence. "Today, I bought 2 tickets. They didn't come. That makes 3 empty chairs. The science fair, the airport, and now this, the 3rd chair." For the first time, I didn't write an excuse for them. I didn't write, "they were busy" or "it was too far." I just recorded the fact. The empty seats. My speech had made an impact. We got a new round of funding. Equiroot was given the green light to expand. We were launching a pilot program in rural Nevada. The complexity of the project quadrupled overnight. I became the logistics commander. I was on the phone at all hours, coordinating with trucking dispatchers in Elko, with clinic managers in towns that were just dots on a map, with data centers in Reno. I was a silent conductor, waving a baton from a windowless room in Palo Alto, and truckloads of insulin and PPE were moving across the desert. I was in the lab, at 3 a.m, staring at our algorithm. It was good, but it wasn't perfect. I saw a flaw. It was flagging the silent clinics, but it was still penalizing the slow ones. The clinics that only had 1 part-time nurse, who could only do her inventory on Fridays. Our system read their 5-day-old data as non-compliant. It punished them with a lower priority. I spent the next 48 hours, fueled by stale coffee and adrenaline, rewriting the logic. I added a temporal grace period. I was building a system that didn't just forgive silence, it forgave delay. It was a system that understood that not everyone can be fast, that not everyone has the resources to be loud and on time. The work was all-consuming, but it was real. A second article came out. This one wasn't in the Stanford Daily. It was on a national tech and ethics blog. They called Equiroot a revolutionary new model for public health. They were praising the project, but more than that, they were praising the thinking behind it. "This isn't just logistics," one of the comments read. "This is ethics in action. This is how you build a fair system." I was reading these comments, these incredible affirmations from strangers. When my phone buzzed, it was from my mother. It wasn't words, it was a sticker, a small cartoon bitmoji of herself, holding up a sign that said, "So proud." I stared at it. A sticker, a generic, 1-button press acknowledgement, the lowest possible unit of effort, before I could even figure out how to feel about it. A new text bubble appeared. "So glad your little computer thing is going well. Quick question, when are you free to come home? Tessa wants to repaint her bedroom, serene mint, and you're just so much better at taping the edges than she is. She keeps getting paint on the trim. Let me know what weekend works. I read the text. Once, then twice. The whiplash was dizzying. From a national blog praising my mind and my ethical framework, to a request to come home and tape paint edges. I looked at the blinking cursor. I felt the old, familiar, gravitational pull. The good daughter, the reliable one, the fixer, the human glue. I should type. Maybe in a few weeks, or spring break is coming up. But I didn't. I thought of the third chair. I thought of the algorithm I had just rewritten. I thought of Eleanor's voice. Save room for your own silence. I set the phone down on the desk, screen up. I looked at the message from my mom, and I chose not to reply. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't an attack. It was a decision. It was a new kind of answer. It was the sound of a boundary being quietly, firmly, and finally put in place. It happened at 12:17 in the morning. I was in the lab, the windowless, fluorescent-lit room that had become my true home. The rest of the campus was dark. I was monitoring the new EquiRoute deployment in Nevada. Watching a logistics map where tiny green dots are trucks move through the high desert darkness. My eyes burned from the screen. My mind felt thick with code and caffeine. A single, quiet chime announced an email. It was not a system alert from the server. The sender was Office of the President. The subject line was Confidential Notification 2025, President's Award for Academic Excellence in the Service of Society. My first coherent thought was that it was a phishing scam, a very, very good one, but my hand, moving on its own, clicked it open. The email was not flashy. It was formal, brief, and utterly silent. It was just text on a white background, but the words seemed to vibrate. Dear Ms. Coleman, on behalf of the selection committee, it is our distinct honor to inform you. Selected as this year's recipient. Singular and transformative contributions. EquiRoute Project. Ethical Framework for Compassionate Logistics. Ceremony to be held. At the bottom of the email, embedded like a royal seal, was the official university crest, a stark, digital cardinal red. I read the entire email, from dear to sincerely. I closed my eyes. I counted to 5. I opened them. The email was still there. I read it a second time, my finger physically tracing the lines on the laptop screen, as if to confirm the words were solid objects. Distinct honor, recipient, transformative. I read it a third time, but only the first few words. My mind couldn't get past them. I wasn't breathing. This wasn't a cheer. This wasn't a plastic trophy. This wasn't a polite email from a dean. This was the highest honor the university could bestow on a student. It was a lightning strike, but it made no sound. It just illuminated everything, the past and the future, in one blinding, silent flash. I fumbled in my backpack for the leather journal Eleanor had given me. The cover was soft and scarred now, the corners bent. I opened it to the next clean page. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely form the letters. I wrote, "This is not about being chosen. I have waited my whole life to be chosen, and it was the wrong thing to wait for. This is about choosing to continue. This is the reward for not stopping. This is for the work, not the audience." I walked back to my dorm in a complete daze. The air outside was cold, sharp, and smelled of damp eucalyptus leaves. The main quad was empty, silent, bathed in the pale yellow glow of the archway lamps. I felt like I was floating. I slipped into our room, trying not to make a sound. Maya was asleep, a mass of hair and blankets in the other bed. I sat on my own bed, my phone in my hand, the email still glowing. "It's 1 a.m, Gracie." I jumped. Maya's voice, thick with sleep, mumbled from the darkness. "You have that look. I just broke the server look. What did you do?" "I don't think I did anything," I whispered. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I got an email. A bad one." She sat up, fumbling for her glasses. I just turned the phone and held it out. She put on her glasses and squinted at the screen. I watched her read it. Her eyes scanned down, then snapped back to the top. She read it again. She took her glasses off, rubbed her eyes, and put them back on. "Gracie," she breathed. And then, all the silence I had been holding shattered. "Oh my God!" she screamed, a sound so loud and joyous it was physically shocking. She launched herself from her bed and tackled me, wrapping me in an embrace that knocked all the air from my lungs. "No way, the President's Award? The actual, real President's Award?" "Maya, shh," I gasped, laughing and terrified. "Quiet hours. It's after 1. "I don't care about quiet hours," she whisper-screamed, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me. "Gracie, this isn't just an award. This is the whole thing. This is everything." A muffled, angry voice yelled, "Shut up!" from the next room. Maya ignored it completely. She sat back on her heels, her eyes wide and shining in the dark. The manic energy suddenly drained away, replaced by a kind of profound awe that scared me. "Gracie," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You did it. You really did it. It's not just that you made them see you. That's not it at all." She reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind my ear, a gesture so tender it almost broke me. "You made the world look at itself," she said. "You made a system look at itself, and it's changing because of you." I sat there, stunned into silence by her words. You made the world look at itself. It felt like a crown, but it was too heavy. It felt like a responsibility I had never asked for. The next afternoon, I found myself walking to Memorial Auditorium. I had a 2-hour break between my library shift and my lab hours. The sun was high, and the campus was bustling. But I felt like I was in a bubble. I needed to see the room. The tall, carved wooden doors were unlocked. I pushed one open and slipped inside. The change was immediate. The bright, noisy campus fell away, replaced by a vast, cool, reverent silence. The air smelled of old, dark wood, stage polish, and the faint, dusty scent of the heavy velvet curtains. My eyes adjusted. The stage was empty, a single ghost light glowing on a stand, and rising up into the darkness was the audience. It was a sea of seats, hundreds and hundreds of them, all a deep, cardinal red. They were silent, perfectly aligned, expectant, a static ocean, waiting for a signal. This was where I would stand. My footsteps echoed as I walked down the center aisle, the sound unnervingly loud in the emptiness. I climbed the small steps onto the stage. I stood exactly in the center, looking out at the 1,000 empty chairs. It was the inverse of the science fair. It was an entire forest of empty seats. Not just 2. I was supposed to give remarks, a short speech. What could I possibly say? I gripped the podium. It was solid wood, and my hands, still shaking from the night before, clung to it. I needed to know if my voice would work. I needed to know if it would vanish in this huge, empty space. I cleared my throat. I took a breath. "When no one saves you a seat," I whispered. My voice flew out and came back to me instantly, amplified by the perfect acoustics. "Saves you a seat. Seat. Seat." The echo sounded thin, hollow, a child's voice. It made me shiver. I stood up straighter. I set my jaw. I thought of Eleanor's letter. I thought of Dr. Romero. I thought of the silence coefficient. I took a real breath from my diaphragm, the way my debate coach had forced me to. I focused on the very last row, in the highest balcony, and I aimed my voice there. "When no one saves you a seat," I said, my voice full, sharp, and clear. "You build one," the echo came back. "Build one. One. One." It wasn't hollow this time. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. It was a command. I let the last of the echo fade into the polished wood. I felt my knees lock. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was steady. I was walking back across the quad, the sun warm on my face, feeling that new, hard-won steadiness in my chest. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. A text from Mom. My heart did that stupid, familiar, hopeful little flip. Maybe she had heard. Maybe the university had sent a letter home. A formal announcement. I opened the message. Gracie, hi, just checking your final schedule. We need to book the U-Haul. We're planning on moving Tessa into her new apartment in Bozeman that weekend after your classes end. The commencement ceremony is that Saturday. Right? We'll be on the road all day, but we'll try to stop and call you. Good luck on your exams. I stopped walking, right in the middle of the quad. I just stopped. Students flowed around me, a river of people laughing, talking, heading to class. I felt like I had been plunged into ice water. I read the text again, and a third time. The commencement ceremony is that Saturday, right? The President's Award was given at the main commencement ceremony. It was the centerpiece of the whole event. We'll be on the road all day. Busy moving Tessa. They weren't just missing it. They weren't just double booked with a banquet. They were actively, consciously choosing to be somewhere else. They were choosing to haul boxes and a sofa up 3 flights of stairs in another state. I stood there, staring at the screen, the sun warm on my head, a cold, familiar emptiness blooming in my chest. This was it. This was the pinnacle, the summit of everything I had worked for, the one moment I had been running toward my entire life, and they were going to be moving furniture. My thumbs hovered over the reply. I could feel the hot, acidic sting of tears. I could feel the old, ragged scream rising in my throat. What about me? For once, what about me? I am winning the highest award this university gives, and you are going to move Tessa's couch. I could plead. Please, just this once. Please, Mom, I need you here. But I looked up. I saw the sandstone arches, the clear blue California sky. I heard my own voice in the auditorium. You build one. I would not beg them for a seat they were unwilling to take. I would not plead for their attention. I would not show them the wound. That was the old Gracie. That was the child who waited. I took a deep breath. I typed 2 words. It's fine. I hit send. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't forgiveness. It was not bitter. It was not pleading. It was an acceptance of fact. It was the sound of a door I had been holding open for 20 years, waiting for them to walk through. Finally clicking shut, I was letting them go. I walked back to my room. I opened the official RSVP portal for the award ceremony. Guest registration maximum 3 guests. I typed in the first name. Guest 1, Eleanor Finch. I typed in the second. Guest 2, Maya Brooks. I stared at the third. Empty slot. I could leave it blank, but leaving it blank felt like a victory for them. It felt like an acknowledgement of their absence, a space defined by what wasn't there. I would define the space myself. I typed Guest 3, the empty chair. In the next field. Special accommodations, notes. I wrote a single line. For the third reserved seat, please simply ensure there is a chair. I will be placing a marker on it. The name is For Who Shows Up. I clicked submit. I felt a final, quiet click inside my own chest, a mechanism locking into place. The day before the ceremony, I walked off campus, down University Avenue. The street was buzzing, full of families and graduates. I found a small, quiet flower shop called Willow Rain. The windows were overflowing with green. Inside, it smelled of cool, damp earth, moss, and the sharp, clean scent of cut stems. A woman with kind eyes and paint on her apron smiled at me. Can I help you find something? I hope so, I said. It's not a corsage. It's a bouquet. For a chair. Her expression softened. Oh, dear, a memorial. No, I said, surprising myself with the certainty. Sort of the opposite. It's for a seat that's empty, but not in a sad way. It's about potential, about the space being there. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. A slow, understanding smile. I see. A statement piece. She went to her cooler. Not roses, she murmured. Too romantic. Not lilies. Too funereal. She pulled out a bunch of white tulips, their heads still tightly closed, pointed and elegant. For Grace, she said, "and for new beginnings." Then she reached for a cluster of deep, dramatic, dark red dahlias, their petals complex and strong. And for strength, for enduring what had to be endured, she arranged them in her hand, the stark white against the deep, bloody red. "And we tie it," she said, pulling a spool of ribbon, "with cardinal red, for the school, for the place you did it." She handed me the small, perfect bouquet. It was simple. It was powerful. I carried it back to my dorm. The afternoon sun was streaming in my window. I set the flowers on my desk. They sat there, white and red, glowing in the light, right next to my worn, leather-bound journal, the book that held my voice, and the flowers that held my space. They were two silent declarations, waiting for the morning. The morning of the ceremony was sharp and perfect, the California sunlight, so different from the flat, hard light of Montana, poured through the stained glass windows of Memorial Auditorium. It didn't just illuminate the room, it landed in pools of liquid gold and deep violet on the dark, polished wooden pews. The air was still and cool, smelling of floor polish, old wood, and the faint, nervous electricity of 1,000 people holding their breath. The university string quartet was playing a version of Pomp and Circumstance. It wasn't the usual, heavy brass band march. It was delicate, thoughtful, the notes rising like dust motes in the colored light. I sat in the front row, a sea of black gowns and crimson sashes around me. My own crimson gown felt heavy on my shoulders, the fabric unfamiliar. I could feel the pulse in my wrists. I scanned the audience, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that was all wrong for the quiet strings. And I found them. Third row, on the aisle. Maya was practically vibrating in her seat. She wasn't looking at the stage. She was looking at me. And she gave me 2 enthusiastic thumbs up, her smile so wide it looked like it hurt. She had her professional camera, the one with the big lens, hanging from a strap around her neck. She held it up, winked, and mouthed, "Got you." And next to her sat Grandma Eleanor. She was not vibrating. She was a point of absolute stillness in the buzzing room. She was wearing the sapphire blue shawl, a slash of brilliant color against the dark wood of the pews. She sat with a straight-backed, regal dignity, her silver hair coiled neatly. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching. Her gaze met mine across the distance, and it was steady, grounding. It said, "I am here. You are here. Begin." And then, I looked at the seat between them. It was just another empty, dark red velvet seat, but it was my reserved seat. And just as I had hoped, the event staff had honored my request. Resting on the velvet, in the center of the seat, was my bouquet, the white tulips, still closed like tight fists, and the deep, blood-red dahlias. They were tied with a single, cardinal red ribbon. And as I watched, a shiver ran over the flowers. I realized what it was. The bouquet was so light, and the air conditioning in the old building was so constant, that the petals of the white tulips were trembling, just slightly, constantly, as if they were alive and shivering with anticipation. The ceremony moved forward. Deans spoke. The provost spoke. My palms were slick with sweat. I kept clasping and unclasping them in the folds of my gown. Then the president of the university, a tall, kind-looking woman with a warm voice, stepped to the podium. "And now," she said, her voice filling the vast, silent space, "we come to the presentation of the President's Award for Academic Excellence in the Service of Society. This award is the highest honor the university bestows upon a graduating student. It is not given for grades, nor for ambition. It is given for a rare combination of intellectual rigor and profound transformative service to the human community." My heart felt like it was going to stop. "This year's recipient," the president continued, "saw a flaw not just in a system, but in our very way of seeing. She identified that our systems are built to reward the loud and to punish the quiet. In her transformative work on the Equiroot project, she taught an algorithm, and in turn, she taught all of us how to listen for the silence, how to find the music in the noise. The president smiled. It is my extraordinary honor to present this year's President's Award to Gracie Coleman. The sound that hit me was not applause. It was a wave. The outline from the ceremony memo had said, "Recipient stands, polite applause." This was not polite applause. It was a physical force, a sudden, rising wave of sound from 1,000 people getting to their feet at once. I stood up. My legs felt like they were made of sand. I saw Maya leap to her feet, whistling. I saw Eleanor rise slowly, her hands clasped. I walked to the stage. I didn't trip. The thought was sharp and clear in my mind. I did not trip. I shook the president's hand. She handed me the award, a heavy leather-bound portfolio with the university seal embossed in gold. She smiled at me. "Congratulations, Ms. Coleman. You've earned this." I turned to the podium. The lights were brighter than I expected, hot on my face. The audience was a vast, dark sea of shifting shadows. I couldn't make out a single face. It was just an ocean of noise. I gripped the sides of the podium, the same one I had stood at in the empty auditorium. My hands were shaking again. I looked out, squinting past the lights, searching for my anchor. I couldn't find it. Breathe. I found my voice. "Good morning," I said. It came out steady. The 1,000-person sound quieted instantly, settling back into their seats. "Today," I began, my voice clear and strong in the silence, "there is an empty chair among 1,000 faces." A single, collective sound passed through the auditorium. A murmur, a quiet intake of breath. I could feel 1,000 heads turning, 1,000 pairs of eyes scanning, trying to find what I was talking about. "It's in the 3rd row, on the aisle," I said, pointing. "It has flowers on it." I paused. The silence in the room was absolute now. It was heavy. It was listening. "I have spent a lot of my life looking at empty chairs," I said. "I used to think that an empty chair meant that I had failed, that I wasn't important enough, or loud enough, or interesting enough to make someone show up for me. I thought the empty chair was a sign of my failure." I looked down at the podium. I thought of the science fair. I thought of the airport. I thought of the empty seats at the symposium. "But I was wrong," I said, looking back up. "I've learned that's not what it means, not always." "Sometimes," I said, and my voice thickened, but it did not break. "Sometimes, an empty chair doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes, it just means you showed up for yourself, just in time." I let the words hang in the air. "My work, the work that you are so generously honoring today, was about listening, our systems, our algorithms, our society. We are trained to respond to noise, the loudest request, the most urgent complaint, the most dramatic data point. We are trained to filter out the silence. We treat it as an error. We treat it as an absence. We treat it as noise." The entire auditorium was holding its breath. The only sound was the faint, high hum of the stage lights. "But the people who are overlooked," I said. "The people who are too tired, or too isolated, or too intimidated to ask for help. Their silence is not noise. Their silence is not an absence. It is a presence. It is a piece of data. It is a story. It is music. We just have to be willing to tune our systems and to tune ourselves, to listen for it." I took a deep breath. This was the last line. This was for me. "I was told I couldn't save a seat for my family today, so I saved a seat for the principal." I looked directly at the camera I knew was filming. "When no one saves you a seat at the table," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me, "you build one, and then you build another one, for the person who is still standing beside you." I finished. I said, "Thank you." For one long, agonizing second, there was absolute, total silence. I had a sudden, cold water fear that I had failed, that I had misread everything. And then the room exploded. It wasn't a wave of sound this time. It was a thunderclap. It was a physical impact. The entire audience was on its feet, not just standing, but yelling. The applause was a deafening roar. I stood there, my hands shaking on the podium. The giant video screens on either side of the stage, which had been fixed on my face, suddenly flickered. The director in the production truck was a genius. The camera zoomed, tight, onto the third row. It found Grandma Eleanor. Her face was streaked with tears, but she was smiling, her hands clapping firmly. She was not crying from sadness. She was crying with a fierce, burning pride. Then the camera cut. It found Maya. She had forgotten her own camera. It was hanging uselessly from her neck as she wept, her face blotchy and red, yelling, "Yes, Gracie, yes!" And then, the director made the final choice. The camera pushed in, a slow, respectful zoom, past Maya, past Eleanor. It settled, filling the entire, massive screen. On the empty chair, it held there. For 5 long seconds, it held on the bouquet, the white tulips, the deep red dahlias, bright and vivid and impossible to ignore under the hot television lights. And on the screen, 100 feet high, the entire audience watched as the petals trembled and trembled and trembled. My phone, dark and silent in the pocket of my gown, began to vibrate. It was a text, then another, and another. It didn't stop. Maya told me later that that was the moment it started. The moment the picture of the chair went viral. The moment the hashtag #BuildYourOwnChair was born. I stood at the podium, watching the image of the trembling flowers on the giant screen, listening to the roar of the crowd. I didn't smile for the cameras. I didn't smile for the audience. I closed my eyes. For just 1 second, I took one, deep, shuddering breath. I thought of the girl in the garage, soldering a wind turbine. I thought of the girl in the library, smelling the old paper. Then I opened my eyes, and I smiled. It was a smile for me. I bowed my head. Thank you. I walked off the stage, the applause still thundering in my ears. As I reached my seat in the front row, the string quartet, caught up in the emotion of the moment, struck their bows. They began to play again, but it wasn't the gentle, meditative version of the march. The music swelled, lifting up under the applause. The notes were sharp, strong, and certain. It was no longer a ritual. It was a fanfare. It was a triumph. The moment I stepped off the stage, my phone, which had been silent in the deep pocket of my gown, began to vibrate. It was not a single buzz. It was a solid, sustained, unbroken vibration, as if the device itself had become a live, frantic thing. Maya and Eleanor met me in the aisle. Maya was sobbing, a high-pitched, joyful wail, and she threw her arms around me, cameras and all. That was, I have no words. Gracie, you ate. You left no crumbs. Grandma Eleanor simply took my face in her hands. Her eyes were still bright with tears. She didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She didn't say, "Good job." She just looked at me, a long, searching look, and then she said, "There you are. I've been waiting for you." But the noise was just beginning. By the time we got back to my dorm room, the clip was already everywhere. The official university feed had posted it. Then someone had ripped it, put text over it, and posted it to TikTok. Then Twitter. Then it was on the front page of Reddit. The numbers were meaningless, abstract, 1 million views in 12 hours, 3 million by the end of the day. The hashtag empty chair speech was trending #1 in the country, above a movie premiere and a political scandal. My phone was no longer a tool. It was a wound. It was a fire hose of raw, unfiltered human emotion, and it was aimed directly at my face. At first, it was incredible. It was a wave of pure validation that I had never known was possible. Messages flooded every platform. From the quiet kid who sat behind me in high school chemistry. "Gracie, I saw your speech. My dad was a long-haul trucker. He missed every single game, every birthday. I thought I was the only one. Thank you." From a professor at a university on the East Coast. "Dear Miss Coleman, I am a first-generation scholar. I defended my dissertation to an empty room. You have given a name to a pain I have carried for 20 years. Thank you. From a woman in Texas, a stranger. I just watched your speech. I've been sitting in the empty chair of my own marriage for a decade. Today, I'm building a door. Message after message after message, hundreds of them, then thousands. People were not just congratulating me, they were confessing. They were telling me their own stories, sending me pictures of their own empty chairs, the graduation, the wedding, the hospital bedside. I was drowning in their stories, my heart breaking and soaring with each one. I had spoken my truth, and in doing so, I had accidentally given a voice to a million other silences. We were an invisible, unrecognized choir, and we had just found our note, and then, cutting through the chorus of strangers, came the voices I knew. A new text message thread appeared. It was from my mother, Marla. Gracie, your phone is finally on. I've been calling. I'm seeing this video all over the internet. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me it was this important? Why did you make us look like this? I stared at the words. Why didn't you tell me I thought of the emails, the reserved tickets, the phone calls, the keynote speech, the years of my life, before I could even process the confusion? Another text came through. From my father, Greg. Gracie, I've had 3 people from the church call me this morning. They saw you on television. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed this family. What you did was cruel. A cold, sharp sting, like a needle. Not, did we hurt you? Not, is this how you feel? But, you embarrassed me. And finally, Tessa, I can't believe you did this. My cheer blog is full of people calling me a spoiled brat. They're attacking my sponsors. Do you know what you've done? You've ruined everything. You always had to be the center of attention, didn't you? I read the 3 messages, one after another, Marla's confusion, a deflection of her own guilt, Greg's pride, wounded in front of the town, Tessa's anger, furious that my light had finally cast a shadow on hers. I saw the 3 texts, a perfect summary of my entire childhood. My phone was still vibrating, hot in my hand. Another 1,000 strangers were telling me I was brave. The 3 people I had built my life trying to please were telling me I was cruel. I sat on the edge of my bed. The room was dark. Maya was out getting us food. The screen of the phone lit up again and again, a relentless strobe light of incoming notifications. I thought of Eleanor's voice. Save room for your own silence. This was not my silence. This was the world's noise, amplified. This was the noise I had talked about, the loud, demanding, frantic requests that drown out the real signal. I looked at the texts from my family one more time. I saw, with a clarity that was as painful as it was freeing, that they were not listening to the music of my speech. They were only hearing the noise of the backlash. They were not sad that they had missed my life. They were angry that they had been caught. I took a deep breath. I pressed and held the power button on the side of the phone. The screen prompted me. I swiped my finger across the glass. The screen went black. The vibration stopped. The light stopped. The room was plunged into a sudden, deep, and perfect quiet. It was the most powerful thing I had ever done. This was not the silence of being ignored. This was the silence of command. I was not the invisible girl, waiting for a reply. I was the architect, turning off the system. I slept for 10 hours. When I woke up, the world was still there. Maya was sitting on the floor, scrolling through her own laptop, a look of awe on her face. You are, she said, not looking up. In so much trouble, and also, you're a rock star. It's weird. She turned the laptop. The Riverton Gazette called your grandmother for a comment. The local paper, she read the quote. When asked for her thoughts on the speech, Eleanor Finch said, quote, Gracie set the chair. It's up to them if they want to sit in it. End quote. Gracie, your grandmother is a stone-cold killer. I laughed. A real, actual laugh. I opened my laptop. My email inbox was a disaster. But amid the media requests and the congratulations, there were 2 I read. The first was from Dr. Romero. Gracie, Proud is not a big enough word. You did not just build a better algorithm. You built a better argument. Rest. Then come see me. We have real work to do. CR. The second email was from a literary agent in New York, and another, and a third. They were talking about a book deal, a memoir on the ethics of being seen. A television producer was asking for a life rights option. I read them, feeling the same abstract shock I'd felt at the award. I created a new folder in my inbox. I named it Future. I dragged all of those emails into it. I closed the folder. That was noise for another day. Maya kept scrolling. Whoa, okay, the backlash has started. What backlash? Not against you, against them. The hardware store's Facebook page is, oof, people are posting one-star reviews. They're spamming Tessa's Instagram with empty chair emojis. The whole town of Riverton is getting dragged. The pressure is reversing. Gracie. I looked at the screen. I saw the angry comments, the digital pitchforks, the venom of strangers, and I felt a cold dread in my stomach. I had expected to feel a grim satisfaction. I had expected revenge to feel hot and triumphant. It just felt messy. It felt like I had started a fire I didn't know how to control. This isn't what I wanted, I whispered. I didn't want to destroy them. Maya, what did you want? She asked, her voice gentle. I just wanted them to listen. I just wanted an acknowledgement. I wanted them to see the chair. Maya nodded. So, what are you going to do now? You have all the power. Gracie, you can just let them burn. You earned that right. I thought about it. I could walk away. I could go to New York, write a book, and never look back. I could let the hardware store fail. I could let them feel, for the first time, the chill of being invisible and judged. But that was their way. That was the system I had just spoken against, a system that punishes. I wanted to build a system that invites. I picked up my phone. I turned it back on. It took a full 2 minutes to boot. Overwhelmed by the backlog of notifications, I ignored all of them, the red bubbles, the alerts, the missed calls. I went to my text messages. I opened the thread with my family. It was silent. They had yelled, and I had not answered. They were waiting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wrote, I am inviting you to dinner at my apartment this Saturday at 7 in the evening, I added. There will be 4 places set at the table. I looked at the words. I took a breath. I added one more line. This is not a trial. This is not an argument. This is an invitation to talk and to listen, not to defend. I hit send. My phone, in my hand, was silent. Oh my God, Maya breathed, reading over my shoulder. You're bringing them here, Gracie. Are you ready for that? Are you sure? I looked at her. I thought of my speech. I thought of the empty chair and the trembling flowers. I'm ready to set more chairs. Maya, I said. I'm not ready to convict anyone. I'm just ready to set the table. I spent Saturday preparing. I went to the farmer's market and bought ingredients for a simple, warm tomato soup. I bought a loaf of crusty sourdough bread. I bought a few unscented, cream-colored pillar candles. In my small, off-campus apartment, I cleaned. I set the table, 4 plates, 4 bowls, 4 sets of simple silverware. As a centerpiece, I placed the candles, and next to them, I placed a small wooden plaque I had bought from a local carver. I had asked him to burn a single phrase into it, the phrase I had put on the guest registration. For who shows up? The soup was simmering, the smell of basil and roasted tomatoes filling my small kitchen. The table was set. It was 6:30. I sat on my sofa, waiting. My hands were steady. I opened my leathern journal, the one Eleanor had given me. I turned to a page from years ago, a quote from her that I had written down. I read it, my fingers tracing the old ink. Love doesn't wait for the perfect time. It doesn't wait for the beautiful day. It doesn't wait to be invited. It just shows up. I closed the book. I looked at the table, at the 4 empty chairs. I waited. The clock on my oven read 7 o'clock. Outside, A fine, cold drizzle was falling, a typical Northern California winter rain. It wasn't the hard, driving rain of a storm, just a persistent, gray mist that blurred the edges of the streetlights. The world outside my window was out of focus. Inside, my small apartment was warm. The air was thick with the rich, acidic smell of roasted tomatoes and basil. The only sound was the low, steady thump, thump, thump of the heat in the radiators and the quiet hiss of the simmering soup on the stove. I had done everything I could. The table was set. The candles were ready. I had turned off my phone, the new one I had been forced to get. The silence in the apartment was my own, a space I had built and now controlled. I sat on my small sofa, waiting. I was not nervous. I was not angry. I was calibrated. I was a system waiting for input. At 7:02, the sound came. It was not a knock. It was not a confident rap on the wood. It was a scratching, a faint, hesitant scritch-scratch, like a small animal at the door. It was the sound of someone who was not sure they were at the right house, or if they were, whether they had the right to be there. I stood. I walked to the door. I did not look through the peephole. I took one deep, steadying breath, reminding myself of the terms I had set, not a trial, an invitation. I turned the deadbolt. The click was loud in the quiet hallway. I opened the door. They stood on the damp welcome mat, huddled together under the dim yellow porch light. They looked smaller than I remembered. They were illuminated by the light from my apartment, refugees standing on the border of my new world. My father, Greg, was in his usual work jacket, but it was his good one, the one without the grease stains on the cuffs. His hands were jammed deep in his pockets. He was looking at his feet. My mother, Marla, was wearing a brightly colored scarf I didn't recognize, a desperate slash of cheerfulness against the gray night. Her hand was gripping the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. And Tessa, she was behind them, partially hidden, as if using them as a shield. Her hair was not in its usual perfect, bouncy style. It was pulled back in a simple, severe ponytail. She looked young. They were all damp. The rain clung to their hair and the shoulders of their coats. They brought the smell of the cold, wet night in with them. No one spoke. "Come in," I said. My voice was even. It was the voice I used for the dispatchers in Nevada. "You're getting wet." They filed in, one by one. Slowly, my father wiped his boots on the mat with meticulous, exaggerated care. My mother stepped in and then froze, her eyes wide, taking in my space, my apartment, my books, stacked everywhere, my framed equi-root system diagram on the wall, my life, assembled without them. "You can put your coats on the hook," I said. They did. Their movements stiff and awkward. They were aliens, studying the customs of a foreign place. They moved into the main room like they were afraid to dirty the carpet. "Please," I said, gesturing to the table. "Sit down." They looked at the table, the 4 place settings, the 4 simple wooden chairs. They hesitated, as if waiting for an assigned seat, before sitting down, one by one, leaving the chair closest to the kitchen for me. I went to the stove. I picked up the ladle. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of me serving the soup, the clink of the heavy ladle against the ceramic bowls, the pour of the thick, red liquid. I placed a bowl in front of each of them. I placed a basket of sliced sourdough bread in the center of the table. I sat down. The steam from the soup rose in 4 separate, wavering columns. The candlelight from the pillar candles was warm, jumping and dancing in the drafts I couldn't feel. It caught the brassy, burned letters on the wooden plaque in the center. I watched my mother's eyes find it. Her lips moved, silently reading the words, "For who shows up?" Her gaze flickered to me, just for a second, and then away. My father picked up his spoon. He dipped it into the soup. He brought it to his lips. He was the first to eat, then my mother, then Tessa. The only sound for a full 5 minutes was the scrape of spoons on ceramic, the tearing of bread. They ate like they were starving, My father finished first. He set his spoon down carefully beside his bowl. He cleared his throat. He looked at his hands, which were resting on the table. They were clean. He must have scrubbed them for an hour. You did good, Gracie, he whispered. His voice was a low, unfamiliar gravel. He still wasn't looking at me. He was talking to his hands. The whole town is talking, my mother added, her voice high and thin. She was twisting her napkin in her lap, shredding the paper. The phones at the hardware store. Greg, they won't stop. I set my own spoon down. I had not taken a bite. I didn't write the speech to humiliate you, I said. My voice cut through the small, nervous sounds. It was clear and cool. I didn't write it for the town. I didn't write it for the internet. I wrote it for me. I looked at my father. You said I embarrassed you. I need you to understand what was said. I leaned forward. I was not angry. I was a professor at a lectern. I was a scientist presenting her data. I am going to tell you the facts. I am not going to yell. I am not going to cry. I am just going to list the evidence. This is the data I've been collecting. I held up one finger. Fact, in 8th grade, I won the county science fair for a turbine I built from your scrap. You, Mom, and Tessa were at a cheerleading preliminary. My chair was empty. My mother winced, a tiny, sharp intake of breath. I held up a second finger. Fact, when I left for Stanford, a place you told me was a Hollywood dream, Dad drove me to the airport. He gave me a one-armed hug and told me not to get ideas. I carried my own bags. I walked through security alone. My father's face tightened. I held up a third finger. Fact, my junior year, I gave the keynote at the Health Equity Symposium. I reserved 2 seats for you. I emailed you the tickets. I stared at those 2 empty seats, right next to Grandma Eleanor, for the entire night. You were at Tessa's awards banquet. I paused. Fact, I said, my voice dropping. When I was told I was receiving the President's Award, I received a text from you. Mom, you were checking my schedule so you could book a U-Haul to move Tessa. I let my hand fall. I didn't tell the world a secret, I said. I just stood on a stage and described the view from my side of the table. I just described the empty chairs. The speech wasn't an attack. It was just the truth. The silence finally got loud enough for other people to hear it. The room was a vacuum. The candles burned. The wicks perfectly still. My father was the one who broke it. He raised his head and finally looked at me. His eyes were red. I didn't know, he said. His voice was thick. I didn't know. In my world, in my family, you did the work. You didn't talk about it. If you were smart, you kept your head down. I thought you were like me. He shook his head, a slow, bewildered motion. I thought being strong meant you didn't need anyone to watch. I thought you were just fine. It just never occurred to me to look. My mother's composure broke. It was not a loud sob, but a single, silent tear that escaped her left eye and ran down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She was so loud. Gracie, she whispered. Tessa, from the day she was born, she was a siren. She was always falling, or screaming, or needing, or winning, and I just ran to the noise. That's all I did. I just ran from one fire to the next, trying to put them out. I thought if I just kept the family running for her, it would be enough for both of you. I thought you were the strong one, the one I didn't have to worry about. I leaned on you. I leaned on your strength until I broke it. I turned my head. I looked at Tessa. She was staring at her empty bowl, her face pale. I was jealous, she said, so quietly I could barely hear her. All my life, I heard it. Oh, Tessa's the pretty one, the popular one. But Gracie's the smart one. I got the pep rallies. I got the ribbons. I got all the attention. But you got the respect. She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. I hated you for it. I hated how you could just be quiet and be better. I just saw what I didn't have. I never once thought about what it cost you to get it. I didn't know you had. Nothing. I was getting everything, and I was still jealous of you. The 3 confessions hung in the air, laid bare on the table like playing cards. I didn't know how to look. I only ran to the noise. I was jealous of your respect. There was nothing else to say. The truth was finally in the room, sitting with us at the table, a 5th, invisible guest. I picked up my spoon. I took a single bite of my soup. It was warm. I swallowed. I am not ready to forgive, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I need you to know that forgiveness is not a word I have right now. It is not a switch I can flip. All of this, it doesn't just go away. This dinner doesn't fix it. I looked at each of them. My father, who looked defeated, my mother, who looked broken, my sister, who looked, for the first time, small. But I am ready to practice, I said. I am not ready to forgive, but I am ready to practice showing up. I took a breath. This was the next step, the new architecture. I'm giving a talk, next Wednesday, at the Palo Verde Community Arts Hall. It's for a local health initiative. I'm going to talk about Equiroot. I stood up. I started to gather the empty bowls. It starts at 8 o'clock, I said, not looking at them. You're invited. I took the bowls to the sink. I could feel their eyes on my back. I turned around, holding the stack of ceramic. It's a small auditorium, I said, looking at the 3 of them. Come early, if you want a seat. A small, strange sound broke the silence. It was my father. He made a sound that was half a cough, half a snort, a choked, painful, tiny laugh. It was the most astonished sound I had ever heard him make. Come early, he repeated, his voice full of a strange, rough wonder. My mother looked at him, and then at me, and a small, watery smile touched her lips. Tessa just stared, as if she was seeing a language she didn't understand. It was the first, real, shared moment our family had ever had. It was not built on trophies or performances. It was built on the raw, awkward, painful truth. I gave a small nod. I turned back to the sink. I looked out the kitchen window. Over the sink, into the dark courtyard. The streetlights were no longer blurred. The fine gray mist had stopped. I could see the sharp, wet black branches of the tree outside my window, each one a clear and perfect line against the night sky. My name is Gracie Coleman. They left soon after the small, choked laugh from my father. The departure was as awkward as the arrival. My mother, Marla, tried to hug me at the door. I did not reciprocate. I just stood still, a pillar of unyielding neutrality, until she pulled away. My father, Greg, just nodded, his eyes still red and averted. Tessa wouldn't look at me at all. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The apartment was silent again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't empty. It was full of the residue of their confessions, the raw, undiluted truth hanging in the air like smoke. I cleaned the table, my movements slow and deliberate. I washed the 4 soup bowls, the 4 spoons. I wiped the counter. I blew out the candles. I was putting the armor back on. The dinner was an invitation. Now, I had to process the data. I had avoided my new phone for almost a day. I picked it up. I knew I had to. The world was still turning. The hashtag was still trending. And more importantly, the Equiroot servers in Nevada were still running. I had a responsibility. I turned it on. The expected cascade of notifications began. The alerts from social media. The texts from numbers I didn't know. I ignored them all. I went straight to my email. I had to filter the noise. But the noise had found a new way in. The first email at the top of my inbox was not from a media outlet. It was from Riverton Community Bank Trust. The subject line was, Alert Dormancy Notification on Custodial Account. I frowned. I didn't have an account at Riverton Community Bank. I used the campus credit union. I assumed it was spam, a phishing attempt, but I clicked it, just in case. Dear Ms. Coleman, it read, this is a notification that the Custodial Education Fund ending in 4522, opened in your name by your grandparent, Ms. Eleanor Finch, has had no activity for 36 months. As the listed beneficiary, you are required to... I stopped reading. Custodial Education Fund. My heart started a new, cold, heavy beat. I went to the bank's website. I used the Forgot Password feature, entering my social security number. I navigated the security questions. I was in. Account Custodial Education Fund. Beneficiary Gracie Coleman. Custodian Eleanor Finch. Co-signer Marla Barrett. My blood felt like it was turning to ice. The balance was $112.18. I clicked on the account history. I scrolled down and down and down until I reached a date 3 years ago, right around the time I was applying to Stanford. A single transaction. Withdrawal wire transfer, amount redacted, purpose educational services, authorized by co-signer Marla Barrett. I clicked on the transaction details. The PDF of the wire transfer form loaded. My mother's looping, familiar signature was at the bottom, and in the memo line, her handwriting, Tessa Barrett, professional dance instruction. I leaned back in my chair. The room seemed to tilt. It wasn't a few $100s. It was thousands. It was the nest egg Eleanor had built for me. It was the money that would have meant I didn't need 3 jobs. It was the money that would have let me fly home for Christmas. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't running to the noise. This was theft. My mother, who had complained about the cost of Stanford, who had told me, "You've always been the independent one," had actively, secretly, taken my future from me and handed it to my sister. I looked at the number. I looked at the signature. I thought I would shatter. I thought I would start screaming. But I didn't. The girl who had won the President's Award, the girl who had built Equiroot, took over. I felt a cold, clean fury, as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. This was not a wound. This was evidence. I took a screenshot. I saved the PDF. I logged out of the account. I did not call my mother. I did not call Eleanor. I sat in my chair, in my quiet, safe apartment, and I filed the information. I would deal with it in the morning. I needed to breathe. I needed work. I clicked back to my inbox, desperate for something that made sense. I saw an email from Dr. Romero, and another, and then one from a sender I didn't recognize, the Lighthouse Foundation. Subject: an invitation, statewide expansion of Equiroot. I opened it. Dear Ms. Coleman, we, the board of the Lighthouse Foundation, have been following your work with Equiroot with profound interest. Your keynote at the symposium and the ethical framework you articulated in your subsequent viral speech represent the future of compassionate logistics. We believe your silence coefficient model has the potential to revolutionize public health in this state. We would like to formally invite you to lead a statewide expansion of Equiroot, fully funded by our foundation, as its first official program lead. I read the email. I read the budget numbers. I read the job title, program lead. This was it, the future, the door I had been building, not just the chair, a way out, a way up. A world that wasn't Riverton, a world that wasn't defined by my family's betrayals. My phone rang, an unknown number, Riverton area code, a cold dread. I picked it up. Hello. Gracie, is this Gracie Coleman? The voice was unctuous, smooth, and deeply familiar. This is Pastor Raymond from First Presbyterian. Pastor, I said, my voice flat. My child, we have all been, so worried. The whole town is just in an uproar. Your speech, while very artistic, has caused a terrible misundersection. Your poor family is being persecuted. People are, they're not being very Christian. What do you want, Pastor? Healing. Gracie. That's what we want. We want healing. And I think the first step to that healing would be for you to make a public statement. A clarification. just to say that you were speaking metaphorically, that your family has always supported you, and that the town of Riverton is a good, godly place. To call off the dogs, so to speak, it's your duty, as a daughter and as a Christian, to correct this misunderstanding. I stared at the wall. He wasn't a pastor. He was a crisis manager. He was calling to tell me to be quiet, to put the gag back in, to protect the institution. My speech was not a metaphor, Pastor, I said. It was a statement of fact. Now, Gracie, that's not a very forgiving. I have to go, I said. Thank you for your concern. I hung up. I was shaking now. The theft, the job offer, the pastor. The past and the future were pulling at me, trying to tear me in two. What is wrong? Maya was standing in my apartment doorway. I hadn't even heard her come in. Her face was pale. You look like you just saw a ghost. Worse, I said. I just saw my bank account. Before I could explain, she held up her own phone. You're not going to believe this. The counterattack. It's really, really ugly. What is it, Ma? An anonymous blog post. On a local Riverton news site. It's accusing you of plagiarism. I laughed. A short, bitter, ugly sound. What? It's accusing you of stealing your noise-to-music concept. It says the entire foundation of your president's award speech was based on an essay Tessa wrote in high school. The laugh died in my throat. It links to it, Maya said, her voice trembling with rage. An old post on the Riverton High website, The Sound of Silence in Our Town, by Tessa Barrett, 11th grade. It's your idea. Gracie, it's all your words. I didn't say anything. I turned to my laptop. I went to my old high school Google Drive. I typed in the keyword. The file popped up. Tessa, English paper, final, Gracie edits. I opened it, and then I clicked on the one thing the saboteur hadn't counted on. Version history. The screen reloaded, a cascade of colors. 99% of the document was highlighted in green. And in the top right corner, Gracie Coleman, 1% was in purple, Tessa Barrett. She had written the title, and her name. I had written the entire 1,200-word paper. I ghostwrote it for her, I whispered. I felt dizzy. She was going to be kicked off the cheer squad for failing English. They're trying to sabotage you, Maya breathed, horrified. And I know who told me to do it, I said, my fingers, moving with a cold, precise memory. Went to my archived text messages. I scrolled back. 3 years. 4. I found it. A text from Mom. Gracie, I know you're busy with your own applications, but this is an emergency. Tessa is failing. Her coach is furious. Just help her. You're so good with words. Just write the introduction and the conclusion. Just make it sound smart. It's not a big deal. Family helps family. I had written the whole thing, and my mother had orchestrated it. First, my money. Now, my words. This was not a simple dinner. This was a war. My phone rang again. This time, I knew the number. I picked it up. Grandma? My voice was a croak. I heard the tremor in the earth. Eleanor's calm voice came through the line. What has happened? I told her. Everything. The bank account I never knew about, the withdrawal, the memo, the plagiarism, the text message from my mother. I laid all the evidence at her feet. My voice flat, cold, and empty of tears. There was a long, long silence on the line. Gracie, she said finally, her voice heavy. You have the receipts. You have the truth. They are two very different things. The truth is a weapon, but you must remember, some truths should only be spoken when you are truly ready to listen to the fallout. Firing that weapon will burn down the entire house. Gracie, yours included. Are you ready for that? I looked at the job offer from the Lighthouse Foundation. I looked at the bank statement. I'm not ready to burn the house down, I said. But I am ready to turn on all the lights. I'm ready for them to see what's in the basement. Then you know what to do, she said. I hung up. I opened my calendar. I created a new event. Attendees Greg Barrett, Marla Barrett, Tessa Barrett. Location, my apartment. Subject, Financial Transparency Eleanor Finch Education Fund. And in the body of the invitation, I attached one single file, the screenshot of the bank statement, with my mother's signature and the memo line circled in digital red. I hit send. The response was not a single reply. It was a splintering. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. My father. "Gracie," he said, his voice frantic, strangled. "I just got your email. Gracie, I swear on my father's grave. I did not know. I did not know about any fund. I did not know about any withdrawal. This is Marla. This is not me. I need to see you. Alone. Before this meeting. Please." "Okay, Dad," I said, my voice quiet. "We'll talk." I hung up. A new text message appeared, from Tessa. It was a wall of text, tumbling over itself, full of typos. "Gracie, please don't. I'm begging you. The plagiarism. That wasn't me. I swear it wasn't. I don't know who posted that. I didn't even remember that paper. I'm so scared. The money. I knew. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I was 18 and stupid, and Mom said it was fine. She said it was just moving money around, that Grandma would have wanted me to have the training. It was my coach." I stopped. "What, it was Coach Riley?" The text continued. "He was the one who told Mom you had the fund. He said I was world-class talent, and this was my one shot. He told Mom how to access it. He said it was an investment in a sure thing. Please, Gracie, don't hate me. Hate him. Hate Mom. I'm so sorry." I stared at the text. A new player. A new layer. The coach. A man who had used my mother's ambition for Tessa, and Tessa's fear, to line his own pockets and steal my future. I had the job offer, a clean, bright future, sitting in one hand, and in the other, I had this tangled, filthy, collapsing mess, the theft, the lies, the sabotage, the network of betrayal. I closed my laptop. I set my phone face down. I picked up my leather journal. I turned to a new page. I thought about the job offer. I thought about the bank statement. I thought about my father's panicked call. I thought about Tessa's desperate, cowardly confession. I wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't erase the receipts." I paused, thinking. Then I finished the thought. "But maybe it can teach you how to sign again, on your own terms." The Palo Verde Community Arts Hall was not Memorial Auditorium. It was not grand. It did not smell of old, polished wood and history. It smelled of burnt coffee from the concession stand, old velvet curtains, and the faint, dusty scent of a high school play. But it was full. Every single one of its 500 seats was taken. People were standing in the aisles. The local news had a camera set up in the back, and I could see them, clustered in the 5th row, a small, grim-faced delegation from my past Pastor Raymond, and several members of the Riverton Church Board. On the stage, there was a podium, a projector screen for my Equi-Root slides, and 4 simple, wooden chairs. I had placed them there myself, an hour before. One for Grandma Eleanor, who sat in it now, her sapphire shawl a beacon in the stage lights. One for Maya, who was fiddling with her camera, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. One I had labeled, "For the Barrett family," and the last one I had left empty. I stepped up to the podium. The chatter died. "Good evening," I said. "Thank you for being here." I did not talk about my family. I did not talk about my speech at Stanford. I talked about the work. I talked about Equi-Root. I pulled up the maps, the data, the silence coefficient. "We are trained to see a lack of data as an error," I explained, the words as familiar to me as my own name. "We are trained to believe that silence is an absence, but what if it's a presence? What if it's a piece of data in itself? What if silence is a story of fear, of isolation, of a system that has taught people that their voice doesn't matter. Equiroot is an attempt to build a system that doesn't just listen to the noise. It is a system built to listen, respectfully, to the silence. I spoke for 20 minutes. I finished my presentation on the expansion into Nevada. I clicked to my final slide. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions. The applause was warm, polite, hands went up. The first few were about logistics, about data security. I answered them. Then, a woman in the middle of the auditorium stood up. She wasn't from the press. She was just a woman, maybe in her 50s, with tired eyes and a clear voice. This is all very impressive, Ms. Coleman, but I saw your other speech, the one that's all over the internet, the one about the chair. The room went completely still. I saw Pastor Raymond lean forward in his seat. The woman continued, her voice gaining strength. My question is about that, when the people who were supposed to save you a seat, the people who were supposed to be there, when your family doesn't choose you, what do you choose? The question hung in the air. This was the trial after all. I gripped the podium. I thought of the bank statement. I thought of the plagiarism. I thought of the job offer. I had all the weapons. I had all the evidence. That's a good question, I said. Thank you for asking it. I took a breath. I've learned that when you've been hurt, you're given two choices. You can become a judge, or you can become a carpenter. You can spend your life passing sentence on the people who failed you, or you can spend your life building new, better tables and new, stronger chairs. I looked out at the audience, at the woman. I choose to be a carpenter. I am not interested in being a judge. I just want to keep building. Before anyone else could speak, a new voice cut through the room. But you can't build on a rotten foundation. It was my mother. She was walking, her steps unsteady, down the aisle toward the single QA microphone. She was shaking so hard I could see it from the stage. The cameraman in the back, sensing blood, swung his lens toward her. I'm Gracie's mother, Marla said into the mic. The feedback shrieked, and the audience gasped as one. I'm the one, she said, her voice cracking, who left the chair empty. I watched, frozen. This was not the plan. I heard my daughter's speech. I heard her say she wasn't a judge. But I have to be. I have to judge myself. She was weeping now, open, raw, in front of 500 strangers and a news camera. I didn't just forget. I betrayed her. She had an education fund from her grandmother, and I took it. I took it, and I gave it to my other daughter. I stole my daughter's future. Pastor Raymond was on his feet, his face pale with horror. Marla, my dear, this is not the place. It is the only place, she shrieked, cutting him off. I did it in the dark. I have to fix it in the light. She fumbled in her purse. She pulled out a piece of paper, a cashier's check. I sold my share in the co-op, she whispered, holding the check up with a trembling hand. My little sewing business. It wasn't enough. Not all of it, but it's a start. Greg stood up from his seat in the audience. He didn't go to the mic. He just stood there, his face ashen. I co-signed the check, he said, his voice rough, loud enough to fill the front rows. I didn't know about the first one, but I co-signed this one, the repayment, beside him. Tessa got to her feet. She looked terrified. She walked to the mic and stood beside her mother. I'm Tessa, she said. I'm the other daughter, the one she gave the money to. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. And I'm the one who tried to steal her words. An anonymous blog post has been circulating, accusing my sister of plagiarism, of stealing an essay I wrote. She took a ragged breath. That was a lie. Gracie wrote that essay for me, years ago, to keep me from failing, and when this all came out, I let the post go up. I used her kindness as a weapon against her. I am reading this. This is my formal, public apology, and I am withdrawing the post. I am so sorry. Gracie. The room was in a state of stunned, absolute silence. Pastor Raymond, seeing his entire town's reputation collapsing, strode to the microphone. He gently moved Marla aside. "This is a miracle," he boomed, his pastoral voice taking over. "This is the miracle of public confession. The devil is being cast out now. Now, let us all bow our heads in a prayer of reconciliation. Let us ask the Lord to heal this broken family." He bowed his head, expecting the room to follow. No, the word was quiet. But I was at the main podium. The microphone made it definitive. Pastor Raymond's eyes snapped open. "Thank you, Pastor," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. But I've had enough of healing with words. I've had enough of prayers that just smooth things over." I stepped away from the podium and walked to the center of the stage. "Today," I said, looking at him, at my family, at the audience, "we are going to pray with action. We are going to heal by sitting down, together." I walked over to the last, empty wooden chair. I reached under my own seat, and I picked up the small wooden plaque I had brought from my apartment. I placed it carefully on the seat of the empty chair. The cameraman zoomed in, and the image of the plaque filled the projector screen behind me. "For who shows up?" "I left this chair empty," I said, turning to the audience. "But it is not an accusation. It is an invitation. This chair is for anyone in this room who has ever shown up to a moment in their life and found that their seat was empty. This is for anyone who has felt invisible." I gets to the stage steps. "The floor is open. This is not a confession. This is not a speech. If you are one of those people, I invite you to come up and sit in this chair for 1 minute, to be seen, to claim the space. We will wait for you." For a long, agonizing moment, no one moved. Then, the woman who had asked the question, the woman with the tired eyes, she stood. She walked down the aisle. She climbed the steps. She did not look at me. She looked at the chair. She sat down. The audience was breathless. She sat there, for 1 minute, in total silence. She closed her eyes. Then she stood, nodded to me, and walked off the stage. And then, another person came. A young man in a college sweatshirt. Then an elderly man with a cane. Then a woman in a business suit. A line formed. A silent, slow, steady procession of people. Walking onto my stage, sitting in my chair, claiming their space, and leaving. No words, no drama, just the simple, profound, communal act of showing up. I stepped back, into the shadows of the stage, and I watched. I glanced at my family. My mother, Marla, was being held by Grandma Eleanor, who had reached across the empty family chair and was gripping her hand. Maya had put her arm around Tessa, who was crying silently into her shoulder, and my father, Greg, was on the stage. I hadn't even seen him come up. He wasn't in the line. He was crouched by the family chair. He had noticed it was wobbly, and in that moment, in the middle of this profound community ritual, my father, the mechanic, had pulled a quarter from his pocket and was carefully, methodically, jamming it under the short leg to make it stable. He fixed the chair. A few people in the front row saw him. A small, warm ripple of laughter, of understanding, went through the crowd. He was praying with action. My phone, sitting on the podium, vibrato. Maya, seeing it, walked over and looked at the screen. Her eyes went wide. She walked over to me in the shadows. "Gracie," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It's the Lighthouse Foundation. The official offer. They need a yes or no. Right now." I looked out. I saw the last person in line, a teenage girl, sitting in the empty chair, her face resolute. I looked at my father, who was testing the newly stable chair with his hand, nodding, satisfied. I looked at my mother and sister, held by my real family. This was the system. This was the network. It wasn't just code. It was this, messy and broken and real and showing up. I looked at Maya. I looked at the job offer, my future, waiting on a vibrating phone. I looked at the plaque. Yes, I whispered. Tell them yes. The line was finished. The last person had walked off the stage. I walked back to the podium. The room was quiet, the air thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It wasn't forgiveness. It was release. Thank you, I said. Thank you all for showing up. I looked at the family chair, now stable. I looked at my family, shattered and beginning to reassemble. If there was anyone, I said, my voice steady, who still couldn't be here today, if there is anyone in your life who still hasn't arrived, this seat remains empty. It is not here to assign blame. It is here to welcome. I nodded to the tech booth. The stage lights began to fade, one by one. The last light to go down was the single, warm spotlight on the fourth chair. It illuminated the dark, polished wood, the simple, hand-carved plaque. It caught the edges of the bouquet I had placed at its feet, the white tulips and the deep red dahlias, and as the auditorium went dark, the polished wood of the empty seat caught that last, single sliver of light. It glowed for a second, not like an ending, but like a pathway, a small, bright opening in the dark. The stage was black, in the silence of the wings, on the podium, my phone, dark and quiet, lit up again. Another call, another message. The noise would continue, but the chair, finally, had spoken, and it had said enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.